Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Coach Barreline, and today we're going to continue our discussion of the Constitution. We're going to talk about the ratification of the Constitution and how that develops, and how really the outcries of against creating the strong central government results in what we know as the Bill of Rights. So we're going to get right in and talk about it, and kind of talk about how ratification goes and the struggle over ratification. So basically, the country divides into two camps: the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Constitution created a much stronger national government than existed under the Articles of Confederation, and certain powers were left to the states. And many of these changes and surprise angered people. They were under the understanding that the Articles were going to be amended, not an entirely new type of government created. They worried about too powerful of a national government. So you had the Federalists, who were supporters of the Constitution, and on the other side you had the Anti-Federalists, who were opponents of the Constitution. And these groups are really going to turn into the first political parties a little bit down the road when we talk about like the election of 1800. Anyway, so the Federalists believed, they were led by James Madison, John Dickinson, and Alexander Hamilton. They believed that you needed to have a strong central government. They also had important support from Franklin and Washington, probably the two most revered people of their time. But the Federalist cause was generally popular in the cities, but most Americans at the time really didn't believe in the Federalist cause. And the Federalists were well organized, and they knew how to gather political support. The Anti-Federalists, however, were less organized, more rural. Court consisted of farmers and planters, and they agreed on one central issue. They disagreed central authorities, strong central government. They believed that a strong national government would lead to a tyranny, much like what they had just gotten rid of through the Revolution. So Anti-Federalists worried that government would abuse both states' rights and individual liberties. And they thought that the new government established, proposed by the Constitution, favored the educated and the wealthy over ordinary people. Now, the Anti-Federalists were led by Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, and Robert Yates. And basically, Jefferson would have been in this camp, but he was in Paris as the ambassador to France during the debate. So that adds an extra element onto it. And Madison generally sided with Jefferson when it came to such issues. So it's interesting to think about what would have happened had Jefferson been around for the debates in the Constitutional Convention. But Robert Yates was a New York delegate that was an Anti-Federalist, and he wrote essays under the name of Brutus. So Anti-Federalists said, look, we're not even going to consider this Constitution unless you add a Bill of Rights. They wanted to spell out basic rights in the Constitution and make sure those rights would be protected. And this became kind of the center point of the struggle over ratification. Congress called for special ratifying conventions in each state, and the process went forward. There were a number of essays published arguing this back and forth, but the most famous of those are the Federalist Papers. And the Federalist Papers were written under the name of Publius, and basically they circulated widely in newspapers throughout the colonies, and they were all collected in a book called The Federalist, and they're also known as the Federalist Papers. So the main goal of the essays was to persuade New York delegates to ratify the document by explaining the advantages that it would bring. And the main authors are James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay, three of the most gifted minds of their generation, certainly political minds especially. So they write the Federalist Papers to try to drum up support for the Constitution. So the ideas in the Federalist Papers is basically this. Hamilton says the decision we're about to make is important for the whole world. We can't afford to mess this up. We messed it up with the Articles, and we can't mess it up now. And Madison says, look, if we don't have a united national government, a strong national government, then we're going to break into factionism, which each little area dealing with what's best for it. And he said that was dangerous. He noted that factionism had torn apart some European governments and that they were a natural part of American society and should not be suppressed. So he believed that a Republican government, one in which there's a strong national government with protected rights, guaranteed rights, and protected rights for the states, that it would help balance the influence of these groups, of these factions. He didn't believe that the government should try to prevent those factions from existing, but that the government should help balance the influence of them. And he also explained the separation of powers, describing in the Constitution how it would limit the government powers. This was based on Montesquieu's idea of separation of powers idea. If you limit the power of government and have checks and balances, that it will prevent any one part of the government from becoming too powerful. Very early on in the fight for ratification, people seize on a Bill of Rights as a possible common ground or compromise between the two ideas. So there is a fight for ratification. Now, the Federalists were better prepared than their opponents. They were better organized. So they quickly organized and gained control of several of the state conventions, specifically in the smaller states. So after 11 states had ratified the Constitution, the Congress of the Confederation set dates for elections to choose members of Congress and presidential electors. So very quickly, ratification, after 11 states had ratified, basically the Congress took steps towards establishing a national government. However, several crucial states ratified the Constitution only because they were promised a Bill of Rights. So that was a necessary contingency for them to sign on to ratify. So once the new Congress was elected, it needed to add a bill in the form of amendments to the Constitution. Madison took charge of putting the Bill of Rights through Congress. He was the one that shepherds it through Congress. And he pointed out that in England, the Constitution limited only the king's power, not Parliament's. So the amendments would be used as protections against abuse, all abuses of power, from king or the Parliament. So the states approved 10 of the 12 amendments that Congress approved, and they became the Bill of Rights. For what it's worth, the two amendments that weren't ratified, there was one proposed by Madison basically setting that congressional representation, so Congress would have to grow as the population grew. It basically set a small population number as the each certain number of people had to have a representative. So it basically set up a process by which Congress would grow larger as the population did. Today, Congress is the size of the House of Representatives is set at 435. The other one was basically an amendment that Madison proposed that would basically say that Congress could not give itself a pay raise. It could vote for a raise, but it couldn't. That raise couldn't take effect until the next Congress came in the next election. And interestingly enough, that is now the 27th Amendment, the most recent amendment to the Constitution in 1992. Like I said, it passed in 1992. And it says that Congress can't vote itself a pay raise. So kind of history coming back around in that case. All right, so the Bill of Rights basically is divided into sections. The first 8 amendments deal strictly with civil individual liberties, civil liberties. Then the 9th Amendment basically states that listing certain rights given to the people did not mean that other rights didn't exist. That's called unenumerated rights. It's basically saying just because we have this list doesn't mean there aren't other rights that people have. And the final one, the 10th Amendment, basically addresses the actions of the states or the rights of the states and the federal government. So it defines two kinds of government powers. Delegated powers, which are powers that the Constitution specifically gives to the national government, and then reserve powers. And reserve powers are the powers that the Constitution does not specifically give to the federal government or deny to the states. So it's basically saying anything not specifically, any power not specifically given to the federal government in this document are reserved to the states and the people. Those powers belong to the states and the people to regulate as necessary. So really, the Bill of Rights is passed are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, pardon me, and really allows for some of these states that were hesitating to come on board and ratify the Constitution. So we finally got the Constitution in place. We've got a strong, stable national government, but there's going to be some problems up ahead. We've got partisan bickering that's going to start. Might sound familiar if you follow today's politics, but the rivalry between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists is going to develop into the first political parties of the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, and then we're going to kind of talk about how those two competing interests develop and cause a crisis very early in American history. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.